and welcome to the Saturday, January 16th meeting of TV Toastmasters. We want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy our meeting. I'd like to say thank you to our special guest, Vicki Hart, for joining us. And not only is she joining us today, it's also a very special day for her. It's her birthday, so happy birthday, Vicki. We have an exciting meeting in store for you. It's going to be a little bit different than our other meetings because we have some of our key members that are not able to join us today because they're out training. So stay tuned and you'll see the exciting twists we're going to have. I'm going to introduce the Toastmaster for today, and it's me. I'm Michelle Lewis, and I'm the club president, but I'm also going to be your Toastmaster today. I'm now going to introduce our grammarian for the day, and that's me again. I don't have to leave the lectern. Filling a couple more roles today, but a lot of our members tend to do that. We wear many hats. The word of the day is benign, and I'd like to ask you to try to use this word in your speaking today. Benign is an adjective. It is mild or favorable results, kind, gentle, and good. The results were benign and required no treatment. So please try to use that in your speaking today. I will be keeping count. I will also be tracking grammatical errors, crutches, things that you need to, or we would like you to be aware of as you're speaking, and then we'll give that information back to the group at the very end. It is now the impromptu speaking portion of our meeting. And what I will do is invite our table topics master up, Steve Aaronhold. Steve is going to be asking some impromptu questions to those in the audience. And you literally have from the time he asks the question until you get up to the lectern to give a response. So we're going to ask that we try to focus on speaking from 1 to 2 minutes. So let's see what Steve has for us.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, Madam President. As Michelle mentioned, this is the impromptu portion of our meeting where we are going to practice thinking on our feet and responding to a question that we really haven't had a lot of opportunity to prepare for. I have actually 365 questions here, and I am going to identify a question that I want to use, and then after presenting the question, I will call upon someone here in our Toastmaster audience in the room to come up and give a response to that presentation, or to that question. You have between 1 and 2 minutes to respond, and it's basically a mini speech. This is where we learn to listen, think, and then respond. Well, I hope that I won't have any that are considered outside of benign, so I'll use my word for the day. My first question that I would like to ask is, what do you love and what are you doing about it? Richard?
Thank you. What do I love and what am I doing about it? Well, that's an interesting question. There's just so many answers I could give to that. Just start with what do I love? Because obviously I love my wife and I love my child. What am I doing about it? Well, I'm trying not to strangle my son when he misbehaves. That's what I'm doing about it. Seriously, I'm trying to make sure he grows up well. I love my wife. What am I doing about that? Well, I'm trying to show her that I love her. I'm trying to do things for her. I'm trying to be a better husband for her. I'm trying to be a better father for my son. Those are all sentimental, and those are great, and those are kind of boring to anybody who's not me or my wife or my son, because everybody has their own relationships and nobody cares about mine. I'm not famous. So what else do I love? I love food. I love chocolate. I love chocolate too much. What am I doing about it? I'm not eating as much chocolate these days. This is a painful exercise in willpower. I love chocolate. So, I'm eating less. I'm eating smaller amounts. I'm trying to convince myself that no, I'm content with one Hershey Kiss. No, the taste of a single Godiva chocolate is, who am I kidding? I am not. I hate not eating the chocolate, so I just don't buy it. Mr. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Richard. I know it's kind of discouraging when you buy something and you look at the bag and it says serves 8. And of course, I think, well, I ate half of the bag. Maybe I'll save the other half for tomorrow. And then an hour later, it's like, well, I'll kill it off and get it over with. All right, thank you for that response. My next question that I would like to hear from someone here in our audience is, do you celebrate the things you do have? Do you celebrate the things you do have? Emily? Do you
Thanks,
celebrate
Steve.
the things you do have?
When you say celebrate, I guess that can go from
up to
here
you.
to here, yes. But I'm very grateful for the things I do have. And one in particular is I was living in this house that I grew to loathe because of the sump pump and the plumbing problems and the septic tank and the driveway that was on a hill that I had to shovel. And when I moved to my current house, I'm always saying, I love this house. I'm so happy that I could move to this new house because it has a short, flat driveway. It has sewer and not septic, which I vowed never to get a house with a septic tank again as long as I live. And that's one of my biggest things that I celebrate is I really like where I live, and it's not the old house. And other things like I celebrate my kids. I'm happy that I have 3 grown children with children, and they all live locally. And I'm very grateful that I can see them frequently, have them over, go over and see their kids, and so I will randomly stop by or take them out to dinner to celebrate that they're close by. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Sounds like the house you left was something out of Money Pit. Yes, you start to appreciate some of those things, like not having to deal with a septic tank or a well or some of these other things when you've had that as your Achilles heel. My next question, and I think I'm going to ask our guest today, because I think this will be one that hopefully is one that you can respond to fairly easily. Which activities make you lose track of time? Which activities make you lose track of time? Vicki?
Thank you, Steve. Which activities make me lose track of time? That would be reading. I can get lost in a book very easily, and some hot tea. And also exercise, a walk or just getting out and walking, that I lose track of time there. So I guess that's, and also playing with my grandkids. I lose track of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Those all sound like good activities that you can just lose track of time completely. If you had to teach something, what would you teach? Michelle?
That's a funny question for me because any of my friends or people that I run into that are in education and are teachers, I always look at them and say, I have no idea how you can do it. Because I just don't think I could do it. I can teach things maybe to you or to you that might be simple, and as long as I wouldn't have to do it in a repetitive, everyday dealing with children, maybe that's the problem. And it's maybe the crazy children. But if I had to pick something to teach, I think it would be treat others like you want to be treated. And I think that's, the golden rule of life. And I don't know if you can actually teach it. I think somebody you have to set an example instead of actually saying this is how you do it. I think you have to do it in a way that exemplifies that mindset and that's your belief. So I think for especially children, they're easily impressionable, and you can tell them you must say thank you every time. But if you don't go and say thank you as well, it's never going to give them the impression that that's really something that they need to do. So I believe that if I had to teach something, it would be by example, to treat others like you want to be treated.
Thank you, Michelle. I was thinking about leading by example or teaching by example when you were up here talking, and I thought, I still think you probably teach more than you realize, especially at work, and most of us have to interact with coworkers if we're not virtual workers. So you do lead by example, teach by example. I know I have one of my colleagues I'm going out with in the field this coming week. And so she's a fairly new person in my profession, which is occupational health. And I'm just a bit amazed that they don't think of all these things that come with being in your profession for a while, that you either have learned the hard way because it didn't happen one time, or you've found it works well for you when you're going to do a particular task that you have. So thank you, everyone. We will come back later in our meeting and do a couple more table topics. But at this point, I'm going to turn our meeting back over to our Toastmaster. Madam Toastmaster?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Steve. Those were some interesting and benign questions. So they weren't too difficult. We all had an opportunity to give out some inspiring thoughts. We're now going to transition to the speaking portion of our meeting. Today we only have one speaker, but I know it's going to be an amazing speech. We have one of our semi-new members. I think you've been a member about a year now. And Rich is working on getting to his halfway point in his manual, and I believe today is speech number 5, which will get you halfway there, and we think you're going to have the other 5 done in the next couple of months, and before you know it, you'll be a CC. Rich's speech today is called Things My Son Asked. Things My Son Asked, Richard Gant.
Thank you. All right, let's get a show of hands here. Who has or had a small child? All right. Another show of hands. Who has or had small nieces or nephews that you interacted with on a regular basis? So pretty much everybody, it looks like. A final show of hands. How many of them asked the most ridiculous questions? They ask some great questions, don't they? I know this for personal experience because I have 6 nieces and nephews and then 1 small child of my own. And I've been involved in most of their lives since they were born. They ask crazy questions. You're familiar with some of them, I'm certain. Why is the sky blue? Why does the toilet flush? Why doesn't the dog fit down the toilet? My son has asked at least one of those. Fortunately, not the dog one. I don't want to have to plunge that back out. But he asks some really crazy questions too sometimes. Dad, why do snowmen have feet? Do they? I hadn't noticed, son. Dad, do bloodworms suck your blood? Where did that even come from? What's a bloodworm? Dad, is Rudolph really real? You're 5, son. Stop asking me questions like that. You're 5. Enjoy Christmas. And being a dad, it's almost traditional that I should just make up ridiculous answers to them. Of course bloodworms suck your blood, son. Bloodworms are giant monsters who will sneak into your room at night if you don't sleep. But I decided a while back that that's a terrible thing to do. First off, I don't need my son screaming and running into my bed in the middle of the night, declaring that there's bloodworms in the closet. Again, I don't even know what a bloodworm is, where I didn't before he asked me that question. Also, I think it's more fun to figure out what the real answer is, if I can, and then try to figure out how to teach it to him in a way that will make sense to a 5-year-old. Because he asked me once, Dad, is winter over yet? Easy answer. Clearly not. Although you wouldn't know it from the temperature recently. Difficult answer. Well, let me tell you about axle tilt. He's 5. He's not going to get that. So half the trick is to figure out how to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but teach it on a level he'll understand. But to begin with, it's been a huge learning experience for me. I discovered that, yes, indeed, there is a such thing called a bloodworm. And terrifying as the bloodworm name sounds, it's about that long. And it's called a bloodworm not because it drinks your blood, but because it's bright red. But interestingly enough, they've got copper teeth. They've got copper teeth because they attack tiny little crustaceans on the Atlantic coast and bite through their shells, and then they inject something that's almost chemically identical to wasp or bee venom into them. And then, once the thing dies, it chews open the shell and eats it. So, is there a bloodworm? Yes. Does it suck your blood? Well, no, it actually does something much cooler than that. It kills crabs with wasp stings, and then it eats them. My son's expression went like this. I don't know if he wants to go in the ocean now, but he's fascinated by the idea that there's bloodworms and they're real. I didn't tell him about the other thing I learned about, because another thing that's called a bloodworm is a parasite in South America that does horrible, horrible things to you. I read the CDC report. It was just like damage and liver damage and macrocephaly in small children. It was terrifying. I didn't tell him that part. Another question he asked, Dad, were there buffalo 1,000,000 years ago? Maybe? I don't know. So, and he asked this because we went to Big Bone Lick State Park down in Kentucky. If you've been there, they have a buffalo herd if you can find it, because the buffalo herd hides. You wouldn't think a buffalo herd could hide. They're huge animals, but there's a lot of room, and there's not a lot of places you can go where you can see them. So, I did some research, and I found out that the ancestor of the American bison, which is the thing we wrongly call a buffalo here in the States, came across the Bering Land Bridge about 2 million years ago. So yes, there were buffalo 1,000,000 years ago, but they're not the buffalo you think they are. Is Rudolph really real? This was a difficult one. But I did some research. And it turns out that the gentleman who wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was inspired by real reindeer. See, when he was still working at, I think it was Macy's, he had a 4-year-old daughter. He would take his daughter out to the Central Park Zoo every year, multiple times. And around Christmas time, she loved to go see the reindeer that they had. She loved the reindeer. And then right around the time that he got asked to write this poem, because Macy's wanted to bring people in, his daughter got really terribly sick. Now, the good news for that is she did recover. So he started thinking, well, what can I do that will make her feel better? What can I write about Christmas that hasn't already been written? I can't take my daughter to the zoo to see the reindeer. I'll write a poem about a reindeer. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was born. There's more. There's far more. He's asked tons of questions. I've got a list that I haven't got around to answering yet, because I write them all down if it's something I can't answer right off the top of my head with an actual answer. And there's some of them are crazy. Dad, why does that baby have a big head? He asked that in a restaurant while pointing at the baby at the next table. Dad, were there dinosaurs around when people were around? Well, yes, birds are dinosaurs, son. The thing I would encourage you, if you have small children, if you have your own, if you have nieces or nephews you spend time with, if you have grandchildren that ask questions, take the time to learn the answer to their questions. Teach them the answer. You'll both learn and you'll both benefit well. Madam Toastmaster?
Thank you, Rich. Very entertaining speech. I'm glad to hear that there are some benign bloodworms, but it sounds like there's also some non-benign bloodworms, which hopefully we don't run into those or encounter those. We are now going to go back. We are now going to take 1 minute to allow our evaluations to take place. Welcome back. We are now going to get our second dose of table topics for today. It's not a common part of our meeting, but because there's only one speech today, we decided to give you guys a second dose. So I would like to welcome our table topics master, Stephen Ehrenholz.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. As Michelle pointed out, we're going to have a second dose of table topics today. I'm going to move to another page of my endless table topics here and select a question to see what we hear as far as a response. Okay, this is an interesting one. How have you helped someone else recently? Michelle?
Thanks, Steve. I knew I was going to get that. You were making eye contact with me. And I should be able to answer this, right? So let me think. How have I helped someone recently? How have I helped someone recently? Well, I can say that today I helped our club by taking on more than one role. I was Toastmaster and grammarian, and I'm also going to be general evaluator. So that is how I've helped someone recently. But the other thing I was just thinking is we went on a family trip this past weekend, well, girls' family trip. So it was my mother, my sister, and I coordinated it. I was able to work it into the front end of some work travel. So we went out to San Francisco, and we were able to connect with my uncle and my aunt that live out there. It's my mother's oldest brother. So I was able to help my mom connect with her brother. She doesn't get to see him very often. They're out in San Francisco, and they come in every other year for Christmas. So it was an off year for them. So I was able to help her have some quality time with her big brother. So that's my answer for today.
Thank you, Michelle. That sounds really neat. All right. Let me find this next question that I had here, and then I've lost it. Okay. What has been the most terrifying moment of your life thus far? I'm going to ask Richard to answer that one. Since you were talking to us about bloodworms.
Oddly, the most terrifying moment of my life, recently at least, has nothing to do with anything called a bloodworm. No, so a little over a year ago, I got the opportunity to work to study for my Series 9 and 10 licenses, which are the General Security Supervisor licenses. The entire experience was 3 or 4 months of unremitting terror. Because they got handed approximately 4 inches of study manuals. And these were the compact, tightly worded ones designed to help me get through the mountain of materials I would have had to get if I'd just gone to like the websites of the SEC, the NYSE, and FINRA. I had to learn all of this in order to pass approximately 160 questions worth of tests in a 4-hour period. Easy, right? Oh, it was nightmarish. And I've been in the industry for 7-8 years at this point, but it always been from a frontline representative perspective, never from I have to make decisions about risk to the company, risk to the client, risk to my job at that point and other people's jobs. And I had to know all of this stuff because anything in the material was fair game. In fact, some of the questions weren't even covered in the books that I studied. But that's not even the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was when I went to go take the second of the two tests. I had to go up to Blue Ash to take the tests. Not far from where I work. You go straight up 71, about 20-minute drive, traffic is good. I left an hour early for the test. Traffic was not good. 2 hours before, a bus had flipped over and turned sideways northbound 71. Just let that sink in for a minute. I'm on my way to a 2.5-hour test that I have to pass to get the job that I've been doing for the past 30 days. And a bus has flipped over. And traffic is not even moving. My heart stopped 3 times. I was an hour and a half late for the test. The only redeeming part of that was that I was able to give them a call at the testing center and explain what was going on, and I wasn't the only person going there that day caught in that traffic. Plus, they could turn on the news and see footage of the bus on its side blocking all the lanes of traffic. So they let me start when I got there. You know what? That wasn't even the most terrifying part of the day, though. So I sit down to take the test. The test, once I sat down, I have no test anxiety once I start a test. I'm fine. I take the test, and then I hit the button to tell it to score the test. 3 separate times it says, now if you do this, the test is over. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes! Are you sure you want to continue? Yes! Are you sure? Give me my score! Then it takes a minute to compute your score. You sit there for a minute. Now you have nothing to do. The adrenaline from the test is making my hands go like this. Waiting. 89 pops up. My first thought, that's the raw score. Oh God, I failed. Oh wait, that's a percentage. Oh, I passed. I couldn't walk straight either. My legs were so wobbly, I was like, but it was over. Finally. That was the most terrifying moment of my life.
Thank you, Richard. Man, talk about building anxiety, stuck in traffic, arriving late when you're already revved up for going to do this. I guess it's one of those situations where it was a good thing to have other people in the same situation that you were finding yourself in. Well, I have one more table topic question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask it, the person I'm going to ask this to knows she'll be getting this question, but I thought it would be interesting to ask and see what another person's perspective is on this, because it's something I think about. What's the best part of growing older? Emily? Not that I think you're old, but I think you're probably closer to my age, so.
Okay, so
You're still younger
I
than
didn't know
me.
you were going to ask me that question. The best part of growing older, I think one of them is that you don't have small children that wake you up in the middle of the night. That's a big thing. Being able to sleep. Well, of course, I wake up anyway now. No one has to wake me up. I just wake up for no reason, stay awake for 3 or 4 hours, and then when it's almost time to go to work, I fall asleep again. I guess that's not the best part, but I guess one of the things is, here the same theme, I don't have to pick kids up from daycare and rush out of work. I can actually get my work done before I leave, or take things home and work on them, or do things more randomly. I get to do more of what I want because my schedule is my own, and there aren't all these people depending on me. I really have no one depending on me right now for my time, unless it's something specific, but not an everyday thing. And I don't have to cook for anyone except for myself. If I want to open a can of soup for dinner, that's what I do. And I really like that. I don't have to spend the whole day trying to think of something that will please everyone for dinner. And I think a lot of growing older, all those things that you learned you can put to use. There are many times when I say, I wish I'd known this years ago. Things would have been so much easier if I'd already understood this. So a lot of it is that I've learned so many things that I can actually use now. I just wish I'd known them right out of the gate. I guess I could probably think of 12 other things if I had time, but I'm really enjoying some of these phases. As my mom used to say, every decade is better than the one before. And I think she's right in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Emily. You made me think about a discussion that you'll sometimes hear people engage in, and that is, wouldn't you like to go back and be in high school or right out of high school? My first thought is, heavens, no. Why would I want to go back and suffer through that again? But the other thing that I think about with that question is, only if I could keep everything I already know, because that would get to some of the things you were talking about. The things that you kind of acquire as you go through different parts of your life that would have really been handy to know and to have incorporated at the time you were going through some of that stuff. So thank you everyone for your response. I'm going to turn it back to our Toastmaster, who will now be our General Evaluator. Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you, Steve. We now are going to transition to the feedback portion of our meeting, and this is the really important part because it allows our speakers to get feedback on their speaking portion, areas to improve, and also some kudos for the things that they've done well. I do have a team. I can't do the general evaluation portion today, and it's a small team. It's myself and Emily. And I'm going to ask Emily to come up. She is the evaluator for Rich's Speech. Emily Garrett.
Thank you. Yes. I'm sorry. What was the title of things my son? Title of Rich's speech was Things My Son Asks. I'm a little out of it today. I have a cold. I'm not really good at multitasking. I don't know. I love Rich's speech. I always do because he always injects humor in every time he's up here, and I love that. It makes whatever he's saying enjoyable. It keeps us laughing, yet we learn something as we're enjoying listening to him. He opened with a few questions and asked for a show of hands and to evaluate that his audience would really benefit from what he was talking about and that we do understand small children. And that's a good way to engage your audience, is to ask questions at the beginning to get them to think about what you're going to say. He had great pauses, and in this project he was supposed to use facial expression, gestures, movement. It's your body speaks, so it was supposed his body movements and everything were an important part of what he was trying to project. And he did that very well, and we're very limited because of the camera in our movement, but his movement, he didn't just stand in one place. He moved around a little bit, but very purposefully. Some people just move around and it doesn't make sense why they're doing it, but his movements were purposeful. His back and forth dialogue with his son, he got up over to the side and like he was having conversation, and dialogue is another way that engages people when you're speaking. The speech seemed to be organized into 3 parts. His frustration answering questions, the learning experience that it was for him, and that he needed to do research to find out some of the answers, like about the bloodworms and how long buffalo have been around and about reindeer. Anecdotes are a great way to engage an audience too. He had several different anecdotes that were very humorous. And the third part of the speech was about embarrassing questions, as we all have probably heard children ask. There was a clear wrap-up. The only thing I don't really think there were a lot of gesturing. I don't know where I would have put it in this speech. I mean, there were like 5 different things you were supposed to do, and you did all of them, but I didn't see a lot of gesturing. But then in your table topic, you do gesture very well when it's called for. So just if you, on other speeches, I would say try to think of places that you can do that. I know there was a guy in one of my clubs that used to do improv, and he was very good at gesturing, and I want to study more of what they do in improv, because I think it will help in the gesturing portion of a speech. But all in all, it was a really humorous speech. As always, Rich did a great job. I really enjoyed it, and I was so engaged in what he was saying, I forgot to turn the green light on, but he didn't choke or anything. He just kept talking, and his time, he did really well, and so I apologize for that, but it was just that it was interesting and funny, and I was really enjoying it. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. One other thing I have to add, I think you did a really good job with the pauses. When you gave us that expression that your son made, you let us all soak it in, and I heard people continue to chuckle, so that's one thing that I wanted to compliment you on. Your pauses were really good during your speech. And I, too, had a hard time coming up with some areas for improvement. So great job, Emily. You did give them something to think about. We are now going to turn it over to the grammarian, who is me. So I tried my best. It was a little bit difficult today because I was wearing a few hats to track, but I was able to do a few things. So as Toastmaster, I didn't have any ums or ahs, but honestly, I'm sure I did. I just didn't track them. I did use the word of the day twice. I did down at table topics. Steve, you had one extended and, which is sometimes your favorite word, but I have mine but you did an extended and you did use the word of the day, so great job there. Rich, in your first table topic, you did an and a you know. Emily, during yours, you had an and an and then I think you had a double and, so you said and. Pretty good. Vicky, first time up here, you did awesome. You had a couple uhs and a couple ums. Myself, again, fantastic. No, I'm sure I had some things, but I obviously didn't write them down. We went the second round, Rich. I didn't catch anything in your second. Emily, you had an in your second one. And then during your speech, Rich, I only had one I mean, it was very engaging. It was hard to track that. And Emily, in your evaluation, I didn't pick anything up. So great job today, everyone. I'm now going to ask Emily to come up and give us the timers report.
Thank you. It's really important to, when you're asked to come up in front of people, maybe at a company meeting, when they say you have 10 minutes or 5 minutes, to stay within your time frame. So we time people just to let you know how you did and what being up here feels like in an amount of time. Our speaker Rich had 5 to 7 minutes to do his speech, and he did it in 7:23 in spite of the poor timer that was timing it. And so that's well within the time frame. Our table topics, speaker number 1, Rich, 1 to 2 minutes for all the table topics. He did it in 1:22. Mine was 1:31. Vicky was 31 seconds, which is great. Just getting up here and not knowing how long a minute really is. You'll get better at that and learn to stretch it out. But that was great just getting up here for the first time. Michelle, 1:22, and then in our second segment, the timer again was distracted by doing the evaluation and didn't time Michelle at all. and then remembered in the middle of Rich's, so I don't really know how long he was talking. And then mine was 2:09 because Rich timed that for me. And then doing the evaluation, I had 2 to 3 minutes and spoke for 3 minutes and 41 seconds. And that's it.
Thank you, Emily. And as general evaluator, I just want to give a few comments. We did get started a little late, but that's actually not so bad because Steve was wearing like 3 hats, getting everything together, trying to give our guests some information about the club and so forth. So with the skeleton team today, we did all right. I did want to actually mention, Emily, these grammarian report worksheets are great.
Oh, really?
I actually really enjoyed it. It kept it organized. I wasn't going back and forth, and so I think we should continue to use these. It made it really, really easy. I didn't have an opportunity to use your other little spreadsheet or worksheet, but I'm sure that will be great as well. I did want to ask, Vicki, did you want to come up and maybe give a comment on what you thought about our meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to say I'm very impressed with this meeting. I'm very impressed with the speakers, and there's a lot to think about. I realize there's just a whole lot to think about during the meeting, and all of the various roles. And but I'm excited about it. I'm eager to learn and grow, and I very much enjoyed the meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Yeah, Vicki, we really appreciate you participating. You stayed up here and give handshakes. You picked up on a lot of things really well, so we hope you'll definitely come back and visit us again or even join us. Those looking in at home, you can find out more about our club if you log on to www.tvtoastmasters.com. I'm now going to close the meeting, so I went from general evaluator back to Toastmaster and now back to the president. So this concludes our January 16th meeting, and we look forward to hopefully you visiting us. Thank you.
Name an effective political leader in history who couldn't speak well.
I take pride in the word
There aren't any.
Because when it comes to a disease,
Freedom requires leadership, and leadership requires oratory. You have to speak to be heard.
I have a dream.
It's all about personal growth and guts.
Never give in. Never, never, never.